Lyndon Stiles is sentenced to death and must die from an injection of a powerful poison. Witnesses and law enforcement officers enter the execution room where the condemned man is brought. The priest speaks to the man, urging him to confess to shooting 11 people, but the ex-military man denies his guilt and reads prayers, hoping to find peace. A drug is administered to the condemned man, and the doctor pronounces the man dead after praying until his last breath. But a time later, Lyndon opens his eyes. He comes to himself in a closed room where a man in a strict suit suggests him to agree to the experiment important for the defense of the United States, otherwise they will execute the sentence. Well, in the meantime, the man has time to think. The sergeant wants to know the details of the experiment, to which he is told that if he survives he will get a new name, place of residence, and a decent amount of money. The man tries to understand from which service his employers are from, CIA, FBI, but does not get an answer. Lyndon can't refuse because otherwise it's just suicide, which categorically contradicts his beliefs, and he agrees. He is placed in a glass box with heavy security. Soon a female doctor comes to him to take samples of his tests. Lyndon tries to joke with her, but it is clear that the woman is very afraid of him. The sergeant explains that he killed people in the war, but the accusation of killing 11 people in cold blood, and it's not true, and he was set up to be able to drag him into this experiment. He refused to kill a foreigner for political reasons and was expelled from the army for doing so. The doctor doesn't believe him, as such a thing is simply impossible in the United States. At the moment, she takes his blood for DNA analysis, and Lyndon does not want her to see him as a monster. And yet, the woman can't believe his words. She takes a section of his skin and hair and tries to walk away, but Lyndon takes her hand. He must know what will happen to him. And then the doctor advises him to save his strength, for he will need it. Lyndon is left alone with his Bible, while the doctors lead a secret laboratory where the remains of alien bodies are on display. Her job is to identify DNA and try to make it as compatible as possible with human DNA, and more specifically Lyndon's. 6 months ago, an unidentified object was spotted over Utah and shot down. All the debris was collected, from which it became clear that this machine is not capable of interstellar flight, which means that the ship was somewhere nearby. The explosion destroyed the machine and there was almost nothing left of the aliens. It was impossible to simulate the appearance with only this, but the DNA is very similar to human DNA. The doctor doubts because no one has ever done such a thing, and how it will affect Lyndon's body. They explain to her that such an experiment has already been done on a monkey, and that monkey lived for almost 3 weeks. So a human being can withstand the test. The more DNA is almost similar, but she does not understand the meaning of the experiment. She is reminded of the possibility of military conflict with aliens, which means that humanity needs to know their vulnerabilities. The doctor goes to see Lyndon when the general who was his commander during the war also arrives there. The men have a lot in common, and now the military man regrets that Lyndon disobeyed his orders and publicized one of their last missions. But the sergeant was sure they were acting out of conscience by killing civilians. The US Army can't be terrorists. The general is angry, but pulls himself together when the doctor announces to Lyndon that he will be injected with extraterrestrial DNA. This makes the sergeant laugh, as he doesn't believe in such a thing. But he is quickly convinced of the truth of what is happening. And then the man confesses that at the trial he called the general the best commander who can vouch for him. These words are pleasant to the military man, but he still gives the command to start the experiment and says goodbye to the sergeant. Lyndon is strapped to a table and begins to inject the drugs. Lastly, the man forgives the doctor for what she is doing to him. Soon the man begins to change. He begins to have terrible pain and vomits constantly. But Lyndon endures all the agony, reading the Bible because he can be deprived of his body, but not of his soul. Finally, the day comes when he can't bear it anymore, and asks for clothes at least because he is a human being after all. The doctor assures him that there will be no more injections and allows him to bring clothes. As if in delirium, Lyndon says only one thing: he didn't kill anyone, he wasn't even there, but why does he have blood on his hands? With these words, Lyndon opens his palms and the doctor sees outgrowths sticking straight out of the man's palms. It becomes clear that the alien DNA is physically affecting the man's brain, physically altering his body, and the brain itself is enlarged. Lyndon feels pain all the time, so the doctor intends to give him painkillers and his blood pressure needs to be lowered urgently. The woman is also concerned about his fixation on his innocence. She suggests that the military pretend to recognize it, but at that moment Lyndon loses consciousness. Doctors rush to him and inject adrenaline, but there are no signs of life, The electrical stimulators don't help either, and the doctor pronounces him dead. And when everyone already believes it, Lyndon opens his eyes, but he has no pulse. And then he puts the doctor's hand to his stomach, where he now has a new heart beating. The pain also recedes, and Lyndon is asked to confess that they believe in his innocence. It turns out that his hearing has sharpened to the point where he can hear all the conversations around him. Suddenly, he wonders about the doctor's name, and she calls herself Ellen. Time passes, and Lyndon changes his appearance, which is not easy for him. But he can now do much more than humans can. He can safely withstand overloads, he can withstand very high pressure, and his strength is 5 times that of a normal man. From this, scientists conclude that aliens have very strong bodies. In addition, he can hear and see very well. And one day the man cannot withstand the conclusion and, having removed the sensors, jumps out of his glass cage and escapes from the base. But it turns out to be phase 2 of the experiment. The general rallies the troops and declares a hunt. Ellen realizes that Lyndon was deliberately allowed to escape so that he can now be destroyed, and she is terrified. But if the aliens are friendly, how can they do this to him? Meanwhile, Lyndon makes his way out into the woods and sees his reflection in the river for the first time. He again reminds himself of lines from the Bible. He has been stripped of his body, but not of his soul. At this time, the military arrives in the forest and is given orders to find and neutralize the real enemy and is authorized to shoot to kill. The military starts looking for him, but he is perfectly camouflaged on the terrain and turns out to be able to make sounds that demoralize one of the military, and lifts him up into a tall tree. On his radio, he contacts the general and confesses that he understands his plan. He will not kill anyone, because now he understands people better than when he was a man himself. He leaves the prisoner in the tree and walks away, while the military men who noticed him rush to the sector and, noticing the figure on the trunk, shoot their own comrade. Ellen reminds them that a hunted beast is dangerous, as this experiment will do nothing because Lyndon is still human. But the woman is not listened to. The military continues to search for Lyndon, but he skillfully evades and even captures the general, who is ordered to tell the military who he is and is forced to give his name and tell them that he was framed by the military and the government. The soldiers are listening to the speech when Lyndon throws a grenade between them and takes advantage of the commotion to escape. As night falls, Ellen returns to her tent, where Lyndon unexpectedly arrives. He has no intention of harming her, and Ellen tells him that she knew nothing about the purpose of the experience, and now she too is in danger. She no longer believes in his bloodthirstiness and is willing to help him regain his human form. Lyndon leaves, but Ellen catches up with him in the woods. She can try to bring back the supremacy of human DNA, and then he will return. Lyndon makes an appointment for the morning and leaves. They meet at the designated spot, and Ellen pulls out a syringe as Lyndon grins understandingly. There's no cure in there. There are at least 20 snipers huddled around them, holding them at gunpoint. The woman betrayed him. Ellen apologizes and begs to be spared. There is no going back, he will never be human again. And the syringe is filled with sleeping pills so he won't feel a thing. And then the sergeant yells to the general to let the doctor leave quietly. He's not going to hurt anyone. And he drops his weapon, and the military gets very close to him. He advises the woman to leave slowly and to be mindful of her safety. Lyndon is reminded that the experiment is over and he is lost. But the sergeant objects. He won because he never became a killer, and he has a soul. The general gives the command to get ready and take him in the crosshairs. The military follow it, and prepare to shoot the former man, as suddenly a sharp sound is heard over the clearing. Aliens like Lyndon appear. They silently look at the people who drop their weapons and then walk straight to the former sergeant and stops in front of him, looks him in the eyes for a long time, and then puts his hand on his shoulder, and they disappear. The rest of the aliens disappear as well, leaving the people puzzled. And then Ellen realizes that it was not people who experimented on the aliens, it was they who tested humans, and humanity did not pass this test. The great advantage of the series is that it was released in those years when the perfect minimum of computer technology was used. All the effects, makeup, sci-fi sets, and movements are the handiwork of hundreds of people. Write in the comments what you think about it.